Funny as it may seem, my first experience with Forgive Me Father is thanks to playing the demo for the sequel despite owning the first game. It's not because I dislike it or anything like that, but rather because I have so many games to play that it can take me a while to get to some of them. Having finished playing the demo for Forgive Me Father 2, I was left wanting to drop everything and play the first one. I can't do that now, seeing as how I have other games to play/review first, but it's definitely jumped up my list of games to play. From the start, I liked the art style and thought it was great. Contrasting light and colors were used in the same room, and that created an effect that made it really stand out. Not only that, it was attention-grabbing. In a boomer shooter-styled game such as FMF2, you pretty much expect to be moving forward at light speed, but that wasn't the case for me. This was the first instance of this, but it wasn't the last because there's a lot to take in. That was made especially clear to me when I spotted some tongue-in-cheek posters that reminded me of BioShock. Seeing as how the knife is the first weapon you have access to, I gave it a try for a bit. I really liked how smooth the knife animations were. I'm sure that it's largely due to the game's art style, but at one point I kept swinging it because I enjoyed seeing the animation play out. This would eventually bleed over into the flashlight and how it's used. Charging the flashlight by cranking it made for an outstanding animation. I also liked the rough sound it made because of how textured it was. Another thing I noticed was how the light would move up and down as you charged it. All of that helped with me feeling immersed in the game. It's a boomer shooter, but it still does a great job with that area of the game, and I'd say that the fact that it's retro style and yet still has so much attention to detail makes it stand out even more. When I eventually started to use the knife offensively, I also started to slash at some nearby objects. I was surprised when I saw that slashing the planks of wood resulted in visible marks being made. I realize I'm probably coming off as a person that's easily impressed, but as I just said, these small details eventually add up. I shouldn't be surprised, seeing as how I was impressed with FMF2's art style right from the beginning, but I thought the gore and blood that was left behind was awesome. Despite that, I was left thinking that it would have been awesome if the death animations didn't pass by so quickly. That also reminds me of how fast the combat in FMF2 is. You might be thinking, that's the point, but due to the game's great art style, I wanted to take in that part of it a bit more than what it was offering. I wasn't trying to play fast, and yet it seemed as if I were speed running my way through combat. Had the death animations at least been a bit longer, I would have been better able to appreciate the gore effects. I've already been hinting at it, but FMF2 has awesome gameplay. I know that I was bothered by combat coming off as too fast, but I was especially impressed by being able to kill multiple enemies with one bullet. I figured this won't happen on a regular basis, but the fact that it's possible in the first place leaves me thinking that it'll be a useful tactic to have in mind when I eventually play the full game, and if I happen to be facing hordes of enemies at once. I greatly enjoyed FMF2's demo, but I noticed that there was some awkwardness when it came to enemy engagement. What I mean is that it was strange how some enemies would just wait until you confronted them, even if they were in the same room and close to you and other enemies fighting. It could be that's just how they're programmed to act, but I also figured that they'd be faster to react. That aspect of combat felt a bit off, but even reloading the pistol stood out to me. I liked that it took a while to reload because that made me have to be careful during combat. I realized that they're both entirely different games, but I was still reminded of what Ocelot says during the first boss fight in Metal Gear Solid 1. It's not as if I felt exhilarated while reloading during combat, but I felt that it added to the degree of strategic thinking required. What I mean is that it's not like in some movies where a guy's got a 6-shooter and yet he's firing off bullets as if he were using a minigun. This is only just one of the overall 3 guns that were made available to me, but I was left thinking how other weapons in the full game would be approached. Something I usually complain about when it comes to boomer shooters or similar FPS games is how you can cycle through your weapons. It's because some games stick to a method that feels awkward or limiting to me. FMF2 resolved that by having 3 ways of choosing weapons. You could go with what you prefer or what's most helpful, depending on the situation you happen to be in. You had the option of using the mouse's scroll wheel, an on-screen weapon wheel, or the numbers on the keyboard. I like having more than one option available to me because I'm sure that there are others out there that have their own preferences. While I've generally had good things to say about FMF2's demo, I did have some other issues with it. I felt that moving side to side felt weird. It's as if the character moves their head first before going in either direction, and I felt that could be smoothed out. At certain points I even felt disoriented due to moving around too fast. I'm not the type of person that gets motion sickness, but something about this particular movement left me feeling uncomfortable. Despite only being around 30 minutes long, the Forgive Me Father 2 demo accomplished what I'm sure its devs set out to accomplish, which was to get me interested in the full game. It delivered the boomer shooter elements I've come to enjoy from games within that subgenre of FPS, but it also manages to do its own thing to a great degree. There definitely were some parts that I preferred over others, but overall, I'd say that Forgive Me Father 2 is well on its way to being a highly appreciated game, so if you haven't yet, give the demo a try. Do you ever get motion sickness from playing video games? Is it to the point where you have to avoid specific genres or games due to this? What are your thoughts on retro-styled FPS games being so popular nowadays? If you enjoyed this content, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, share, and if you're up for it, become a patron. Thank you very much for watching.